In today's video, we have a variety of updated NHL news and rumors to discuss, including the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Winnipeg Jets, the Nashville Predators, and the New Jersey Devils. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to discuss here today. All of today's information comes from two sources, most of which comes from the latest episode of TSN's Insider Trading with Bob McKenzie, Pierre LeBrun, and Darren Dreger, and a little bit of it also come from Elliot Friedman as well, insider for Sportsnet from a recent radio hit on Sportsnet 590. Let's first of all get started here on the Nashville Predators and some information from Bob McKenzie and Insider Trading, talking about Kyle Turris being a key player to watch throughout the season, because obviously the Predators are in a situation where they're tight up against the cap. They have Kyle Turris basically playing a fourth line role. He's making $6 million for another 5 years. And of course, since he was acquired and signed to a big extension, they've also made some other roster moves, including adding free agent forward Matt Duchene. So they have a really strong amount of depth at the center position. Having Turris play fourth line minutes most games recently, he's been playing under 10 minutes in a fourth line role. That's not good for Turris' career. That's not really good for the Predators, and it just doesn't really make sense for them to keep him around when they can get some more flexibility through their salary cap situation and maybe bolster another area of the team by moving him along. It's no secret David Poile certainly explored a lot of trade possibilities this current offseason that just ended, where he did try to move Turris, but there was not anything that came to be. Obviously, he still remains here with the club now. In the most recent Predators game, Kyle Turris did pick up a couple points, and he did play a little bit more. He ended up playing about 14 minutes, so that is a positive sign. Also in that game, though, Philip Forsberg left the game due to injury. At this point, is considered day-to-day. Because of the Forsberg injury, and depending on how long he ends up out, they very well might not pull the trigger on a deal anytime soon. It's really hard to say when a right deal will come along anyhow, but I do think at some point this season, based on McKenzie's information, it does seem quite likely that he would be a player to be traded out. He didn't say there was anything imminent on the situation, but just a player in a situation to keep a close eye on. As we know, there's plenty of other teams out there that are looking for top six center help, and he's proven in the past that he can be a very reliable two-way top six center. More likely number two is where he's best suited, in my opinion. Some teams he could be a solid number three, but really for the most part, he's been a number one or number two in his career, and there's a lot of teams out there who need some help where he could be a number two solid help. I mean, especially division rival Minnesota. I'm not sure if they could ever strike a deal considering the fact that they are division rivals, but certainly they're a team that Bill Guerin has made publicly known that he'd love to add a top six center, and because of the contract, though, might be complicated. Division rivals complicates things further. Really hard to say. That's just me speculating on a team as an example that could certainly use his services, but there are some teams in the East that they would probably be able to deal with as well that could certainly use his help. So watch Kyle Turris throughout this season. He certainly is a player that would rank highly on my list of players most likely to be traded sometime in the next few months. Now, Darren Dreger and Insider Trading did have some very positive and optimistic news regarding Dustin Byfuglien and the Winnipeg Jets. Now, of course, no guarantees or anything at this point in time, but he did say that there was a growing sense of optimism that Byfuglien would return. Of course, there's no real timeline or even a guarantee that it would happen, but based on his sources, he's saying that they get the feeling that there's more than likely a possibility that Byfuglien would indeed return instead of opting not to return and likely end up retiring. Now, I myself have speculated in the last few days and a couple times on video here over the past week, but it really sounded like Byfuglien was leaning towards retirement. All the other information that we've had seemed to indicate that. I mean, if the reports were true that he didn't really train or look after himself over the summer and came into training camp to basically tell him he needed a leave of absence and hadn't really done anything to prepare himself for the season, then certainly I would think that if he decides he wants to play, that it's going to take an extended period of time for him to get himself up to speed and get himself anywhere near game shape. Obviously, getting into games is the best way to get into game shape later into the season. It's kind of hard to do that without actually playing. If Byfuglien decides he wants to return, the Jets will welcome him back with open arms, lift the suspension, and get him playing as soon as possible. Like I said, he could be a big boost to that blue line, who's very inexperienced right now. He could certainly be a leader on the team like he's been in the past. He has this year and one more year left on his NHL contract, earning around $7 million. So certainly it's a lot of cash for him to leave on the table as well. well. But at the same time, if he's battling a lot of injuries and just not sure he has that drive and passion to keep going, then I certainly understand where he might be coming from, taking a leave and kind of taking a step back. Obviously, we've seen that with other players like Dustin Byfuglien, but of course, he doesn't have a contract right now. He wasn't ready to call it a retirement, but he's certainly not willing to say that he's going to sign a contract and play either. So a little different situation. At least for the Winnipeg Jets organization and their fans, if there is some truth to this report from Dreger indicating that the sense of optimism that he will return would be welcome news, and hopefully we'll find out sooner or later. But like I said, this report did not indicate any kind of timetable when we're likely to get an answer. Now, I wanted to touch base here on the Toronto Maple Leafs that was discussed by Pierre LeBrun in the same TSN segment as well, talking about the fact that obviously they're going to have some more decisions to make for the coming offseason. This past offseason was about getting RFAs signed, especially Mitch Marner. Obviously, they had some other guys like Kapanen and Janssen to sign, and they have obviously made some other trades and other things to take care of. So they're obviously going to have to address a lot of their blue line needs for the coming season. Now, they got most of their forwards looked after for longer-term deals. Besides Morgan Rielly, the whole blue line pretty well does not have a contract beyond the current season, many of which are unrestricted free agents, including some key players like Jake Muzzin, Tyson Barrie, and Cody Ceci. Those three players, along with Morgan Rielly, basically make up your top 4D for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, Pierre LeBrun basically indicated that he doesn't feel there's going to be any kind of rash moves here, whether it be a trade or a signing on any of those guys for right now. That Dubas and his staff are basically going to take some time to really evaluate how the season's going, really evaluate how these three players are going to be performing, and decide for longer term which one or two likely fix into the Mets here longer term. Based on salary cap implications, I think it's pretty fair to say that all three will definitely not be able to return, and it might even be possible that only one out of three can return, depending on the contract negotiations and the exact salary cap situation or other moves that the team could make to potentially free up some space. It's hard to say, but I think it's fair to say one can return for sure, maybe two, but really boils down to money, and it's going to be tight to even make that happen. Pierre LeBrun basically said that he feels that the team's likely going to kind of zone in here by about the halfway point of the year, somewhere around January, February, before they get to the NHL trade deadline. Maybe decide which one for sure that they'd like to keep, try to get an extension completed on that guy, which wouldn't be surprising to see it be Jake Muzzin, considering he's regarded as the best defensive defender. Obviously, Tyson Barrie's an excellent puck mover as well. I'm sure they'd love to keep him after what they gave up to acquire him, but it's going to be a challenge considering what kind of year he has. He certainly has the ability with his offensive abilities to demand a pretty significant contract, which might make things just a little bit too unattainable to get him under contract. But, of course, depending on how the year goes, a lot of that is left to be determined here. Considering that the Maple Leafs are a pretty strong team, definitely expected to be a playoff team and expected to have a better shot at going deeper into the playoffs, maybe even being a cup contender. It really seems very unlikely that any of these guys would be traded. It's really a matter of who is likely going to be signed and who might go into the offseason as an unrestricted free agent. So out of those three defensemen, I'd like to hear from you. Which one do you think it's most likely that the Maple Leafs would try to sign to an extension before the end of the season, and which ones are most likely going to end up heading to unrestricted free agency next summer? Now let's jump over and take a look at the New Jersey Devils. Now, the latest radio hit from Elliot Friedman was talking about the fact that the Devils obviously have got off to a really poor start, and talking about the Taylor Hall contract extension talks and how that might be impacted by how their season not only started but how it goes overall. I don't think either the player or the team is in any kind of rush here to make a big decision based on how everything went over the offseason. I think it's fair to say that both were being patient with how this whole process was going to go. But after the offseason that the Devils had, I think the Devils team and Hall himself, it's probably fair to say, had pretty high expectations for things to be much better than they currently sit now. In Friedman's radio hit, he basically said that the Devils understand and know that if they miss the playoffs this year, retaining Taylor Hall is going to be almost impossible. He's made it clear that he wants to be a playoff player. I mean, obviously, so far in his career, he's had very little playoff experience. He's not getting any younger, and he wants to be on a team where he has a chance to win every single year. Obviously, there's never a guarantee at a Stanley Cup or making a deep playoff run, but I don't blame him after all these years of missing the playoffs. He wants to make sure he has ample opportunity for success before his time is up, because some of these NHL careers go by pretty quick sometimes. You never know with injuries how things can change in a blink of an eye sometimes. So it certainly makes sense where he's coming from, and they understand that if they're going to miss the playoffs again, that it puts them in extreme danger for him to walk as a free agent for the coming season. If that's going to be the case, they're likely going to be getting a lot of calls for potential trade to have him move by the deadline and possibly be this year's NHL trade deadline's biggest acquisition. It's certainly a possibility based on how the season has started. Of course, there's lots of times for things to get turned around, and there's absolutely no guarantee things are going to go down that road. I do think it's fair to say if that did indeed happen, that Taylor Hall would be the next offseason's top free agent on the market, and it would certainly create a lot of intrigue and have a lot of interest. He's made it known as well that one of the most recent free agents that he found very interesting how it was all handled was John Tavares, that he's talked to him about how the process went and everything like that. So he very well could see a similar type of situation where he's willing to interview with certain teams only by invitation and kind of narrow things down and make a decision on where he wants to play out his future. Now, Elliot Friedman made it clear that he feels that if Taylor Hall were to become available via trade or as a free agent next summer, that the Edmonton Oilers would be very interested in bringing him back. That obviously he said time heals all wounds. The Oilers long enough that a lot of the animosity he might have felt towards the team likely would be gone. There's a whole new regime there, new GM, new coach, new systems. Everything's all new really since he's been gone, so that he might be open to a return, and they would be more than willing to bring him back. Obviously, given where everything's at with that team, they've got off to a hot start this year. But they could certainly use another top winger to play in their top six to really round out that team and complement things that they already have. That would certainly make them a much stronger team, in my opinion, if that ever did indeed take place. So I guess the question I pose to you here today is, will New Jersey's slow start get turned around? And if it doesn't, is Taylor Hall all but gone from New Jersey? Do you think you see him as being a trade deadline candidate, or possibly next offseason's biggest free agent to watch as we head into July 1st next summer? Now, speaking of the Devils and other teams like the Dallas Stars and the Minnesota Wild, it was also discussed during his Insider Trading segment that all of these teams' GMs have all noted that they intend to be patient and won't be making any rash decisions regarding a coach being fired or a significant trade just yet. Most of these teams have played 5 or 6 games, and it's still a little bit early. All the insiders basically said they felt it would take a little bit longer of a poor stretch before they saw anything drastic take place. That between ownership and management of all these teams, they're still willing to kind of see what they have here and be patient and try to get things turned around with what they have before we see any significant moves. I know we've talked a lot about some of these other coaches possibly being on the hot seat as well, and we very well might see a first coach casualty here in the next few weeks or so, depending on how everything goes for these clubs. But they did report, like I said, that all these teams are expected to be patient, and like I said with the Devils, I don't expect anything big to happen here in the very short term. It just really depends. This can only go on for so long before they lose their patience and start making some moves. So that is all your latest updates for today. We always want to know your thoughts and opinions and everything discussed, so make sure you leave some comments down below and let me know what your thoughts are. We can continue the conversation down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future videos, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.